Hello and welcome to this tutorial from Pro Photo Vector. My name is Mike Davies, and in this tutorial I'll be showing you guys an overview of the Affinity layout. This will by no means be a comprehensive overview of every single feature found in Affinity Photo because there are tons of features. However, I will be providing a pretty solid introduction, especially for beginners, on how Affinity Photo is laid out and how everything works feature-wise in general in Affinity Photo. That being said, there are 8 main layout areas inside of Affinity Photo. That starts with the very top here with the menu bar. Below that and to the left is the Persona toolbar. To the right of that is the toolbar, and get used to that word because there's a lot of areas in Affinity called the toolbar. But below that we have the context toolbar. And below that to the very left side of the user interface is going to be your tools panel. To the right of that you have your document view. To the right of that you have your studio. And at the very bottom of the Affinity Photo user interface is going to be your status bar. Before I dive into a bit more detail about each layout area, I do want to mention a concept called the persona. So persona in Affinity Photo terminology is essentially a workspace. There are multiple personas you can choose from, and each persona is going to have its own settings, its own tools, its own menus. So basically everything inside of Affinity Photo is going to be dynamic, and it's going to be based on the persona you have selected. We'll get a bit more into that as this tutorial goes on, but let's start at the very top with the menu bar. So this is going to essentially contain all of the main menu items or the main features found inside of Affinity Photo. So you can access various features using the various menu options here. So for example, you can go to File, Personas, and choose from these personas, which we will go over. You can also go to File, New to create a new document. You've got various other options for creating new instances of something. So for example, a new panorama. This allows you to stitch panoramic images together. You can open an image by going to File, Open, which is how I got this image open here. You can go to File, Save to save whatever you're working on. If you've already saved a document, go to File, Save As, and that will just save this with a new name. That way you don't save over the original name of whatever you're working on. You can also go to Export if you want to export this as a different file type like a JPEG. And you've also got a print option here if you want to print this. So I'm not going to go through every option in every single menu, but the next menu item is the Edit menu. So you can edit cut, edit copy, edit paste, and you can also go to Edit Preferences. You've got some options here for the text tool or working with text in general, options for your document if you want to set up your document or you want to rotate it or flip it. You've got layer options here when you're working over here inside of layers. The select menu is going to allow you to perform various actions with selections. The arrange menu allows you to adjust the stacking order for the most part when it comes to layers. And you've also got options here for aligning, and a few transformation options in here. Next you have filters, so you have various effects inside of here as well as some photo editing or adjustment options. The view option for changing the view as you're working on a document or image. You've got some options for adjusting your window that you're working in. And finally you have the help menu, which allows you to select various help options here if you're looking for information on how to use Affinity. So this menu bar will change depending on the persona you have selected or the workspace you have selected. And you can select your persona over here inside of the Persona toolbar. So by default, this is set to Photo Persona. This is just going to give you all of the options, tools, panels, etc. for editing a photo. This also includes various paint tools, text tools, etc. So many drawing tools and manipulation tools. So this is going to be where the bulk of your tools and settings and features are located when you're working inside of Affinity. There's also 4 other main personas here inside of the Persona toolbar. So for example, we have the Liquify persona. When I click on this, it's going to take me here to the Liquify persona, and you can see that the workspace is going to change significantly. So the main menu bar here will change, the tools inside of here will change, the toolbar, which we're going to go over next, is going to change, and your studio. And this just allows you to basically manipulate or warp pixels. So this is similar to Photoshop's Liquify tool as well as GIMP's warp tool. So I'll come over here and hit cancel. You also have the develop persona for developing raw images. We're working with a JPEG image, so we're not really going to get the full benefits of this right now, but this is what this looks like over here. Most of the features will be in the studio area. You also have your tools over here. Let me hit cancel. To the right of that, you have tone mapping. This is for 32-bit images. It allows you to just change, and just waiting for that loading to finish up, it allows you to change the tonal values or the tone of your image. Again, this is built for 32-bit images, so higher bit depth images, although it will work in lower bit depth images as well. But I'll hit cancel. And the final persona here on the far right is going to be the export persona. So this one's kind of weird, but basically what it allows you to do is create slices on your image. And these slices act as little export areas. So you can draw a slice here using the slice tool at the very top of your tools panel inside of this persona. And by the way, you'll see the icons for the most part have disappeared here inside the toolbar. There's some over here on the right. But basically you draw a slice, which is going to be a little export area. And then you come over here to your slices panel. And for example, if I only wanted to export this one slice area, I could drop this down and choose the type of file I want to export this to, the name, and then click this little icon, and that will export the little slice area. I can always adjust the size of this slice and add additional slices. So this just comes in handy when you want to export separate parts of the image as separate files, or maybe you're a developer and you want to create slices for the web so that you can go in and add code to those slices to make things clickable, for example, or have different hover properties. You can also export all the slices simultaneously with this button here. And if you wanted to, you can click on a slice and delete it. I'm going to try to not get too deep into slices here, but that's the gist of the export persona. So let's go back over here to the photo persona, which is basically the default persona. So to the right of the personas toolbar is going to be just the toolbar. And here you essentially have quick access icons for commonly used features inside of a particular persona. So for example, the first set of icons here are going to be auto correction or auto adjustment icons. This allows you to automatically make edits to your image. For example, we have auto levels, auto contrast, auto colors, and auto white balance. You can do all of these things manually when adjusting an image inside of Affinity Photo. But if you wanted to quickly try to just make an adjustment to a photo, so let me make sure I'm clicked on here and then click this auto levels. That's going to automatically make some adjustments to that photo layer. So I'll hit Control Z to undo that. It didn't make any major adjustments because this photo isn't too terrible in terms of the colors and everything. But the next set of icons is going to be for selections. So you can select everything here on your document and you can deselect everything. And then this is going to be to invert the selection. So let's say we come over here and grab one of our marquee tools. Let's go with the rectangular marquee tool and click and drag to draw this. So everything inside of this marquee is going to be selected. If I click this icon, it'll invert that selection, and that's pretty much all that icon does there. So I'll come over here and click to deselect that area. The next option is for the quick mask tool. So for those of you that are familiar with drawing masks on a layer, maybe you've used another program like Photoshop or GIMP. When you mask an area of a photo out, you're essentially making that part of the photo or the document transparent. So this just allows you a quick way of drawing a mask. I'm not going to get too much into that, but we do have a drop down here for additional options with your quick mask. To the right of that, we have our snapping options. So this just determines the behavior of objects and layers here as you're working inside of Affinity. So right now this is set to force pixel alignment as well as move by whole pixels. So there's a grid behind here, behind this image that you can't see. And this is just ensuring that everything is going to basically snap to that grid as you drag objects around, for example. And you also have another option here for more specific snapping. And you can see a drop down here with additional options. You have to enable snapping first, and that's going to turn on these other options here. Not going to get too much into that, but to the right of that is going to be your assistant manager. So the assistant is basically going to complete some auto tasks, and it's going to alert you anytime it completes a task for you. That just kind of makes the usability of Affinity a bit easier. So if I click on this, it's going to bring up the assistant manager, and here you can enable or disable the assistant. And then you can also choose the behavior of the assistant. So you can see here that if you begin painting on a layer that's not selected, it's going to automatically add a new pixel layer and then begin painting on that. So that's just one of the many things that the assistant is going to do automatically for you. So I'll click close. Next to the Assistant Manager icon is going to be a series of icons dedicated to the layer stacking order. So anytime you have an object on here, for example, let's come over here to the vector shape group and draw a simple rectangle. So I'm going to click and drag this on here. In my particular case, it actually drew the rectangle below the original background layer. So if I wanted to move this up in the layer stacking order, I can come over here and, for example, move this forward one, and that's going to move that up one in the stacking order. And if I had more than 2 layers over here, I could come over here and move this to the back, and it would move this below all of the layers inside of the layers panel. So that's what these little icons do. To the right of that, you have the alignment icon. So when I click on that, that's going to allow me to choose from a variety of options for aligning something. So in this case, I have this vector object selected here, this rectangle. So I can align this horizontally, or I can come over here and align this vertically. And if I wanted to apply those changes, just click apply, and those changes have now been applied. And let me just move this back to the top of the stacking order. That way we can get a better idea of what's going on. To the right of the alignment icon is going to be a series of icons for placing objects or images relative to another object or image you have open. So for example, let me grab the move tool and click on this vector rectangle we drew, and I'll hit Control X to cut that. So that's going to remove those pixels from the composition, but copy it to our clipboard. And with the move tool still selected, let's say I'm clicked on this image here. Let me make sure this is unlocked. If I were to come over here and select, for example, let's go with insert behind the selection and hit Control V, that's going to paste that rectangle behind the active layer. So in this case, that's the background layer. Let me hit Control Z. If I were to change that option to something like insert at the top of the layer and then hit Control V, you'll see that will paste our object on top of the original background layer. And let me hit Control Z one more time. The other option is to insert this inside the selected layer. So when I click that option and hit Control V, that's going to paste this at the top, but if I move this around, it's actually going to use this main image layer as a frame. It's kind of hard to tell right now because the image is the same size as the document, but let's move this to the left a little bit there and click on the rectangle shape again. So we have to double click on it because it's inside of the image layer. And you'll see that as we move this around, it's actually inside of that main image. So let's hit Control Z to back up. All right, so that was the toolbar. Now let's move on to the next area, which is going to be the context toolbar. As I mentioned, a lot of things are labeled with toolbar in them in Affinity, but this is basically going to be your tool options. So anytime you have a tool selected over here in your tools panel, this context toolbar is going to update based on the tool you have selected. So right now I have the view tool, which is essentially the hand tool for those of you who are used to other programs. And when you have the view tool selected, all it's going to do up here in the context toolbar is show your image information. So you've got like your image dimensions and size, and you also have the color profile you're working with. And to the right of that, you have some camera information about the photo you took. Also at the far right end, you have the units of your document. So right now this is set to pixels. I can change this to something like inches, for example, and that's going to update the rulers here. We'll get into the rulers in a moment. So the context toolbar will change as we change the tool. So you can see there as I grab the move tool, this has been updated. And let's grab another tool like the gradient tool. There you can see the context toolbar updates for that. So these are just the various tool options for the tools that are found inside of Affinity Photo. So speaking of tools, on the far left side, as I've already mentioned a couple times, is your tools panel. So this is going to be all of the tools inside of a persona. So right now we're in the photo persona, which means we're going to have all these tools inside of here. And you've basically got two representations of tools in the tools panel. You've got single tools. So these are just going to be one tool that you can click on to access those features. And as you click on a tool, your mouse pointer will typically change. So it's going to match whatever the mouse pointer is for that specific tool. But you've also got tool groups, so you'll see that if I click and hold a tool group, there are multiple tool groups inside of here. So in this case, we've got 5 different tools inside the marquee tool group. And whether it's a single tool or a tool group, you're going to have a shortcut key. The difference being though, if for example, I want to access a single tool, for example, the bucket fill tool, I'll hit the G key and that will access that tool. And I called it the bucket fill tool. It's called the flood fill tool inside of Affinity Photo. But on the other hand, if I wanted to access a tool inside of a tool group, I would not only hit the M key to access a tool, but also continue hitting the M key to cycle through those tools. So tools inside of tool groups in Affinity actually share a shortcut key, and you do have to hit that shortcut key multiple times to get to the tool that you want inside of a tool group. So the tools do change like the other areas inside of Affinity Photo, depending on the persona you have selected. These are going to be the tools for your photo persona, and here just another example is your liquify persona, so the tools do change for this. And I'll just hit cancel. I'm not going to cover all the tools for this tutorial. To the right of your tools panel is going to be your document view. So this allows you to view the image or the document you have open inside of Affinity. You'll also find your rulers here on the left and top sides of your image. And if you don't see your rulers, you can hit Control R or Command R on your keyboard. That will either show or hide your tools depending on whether or not you have them shown already. And you'll recall that I did change my units here to inches, so I can come back to the View tool and change this to a different unit. So we can go with pixels, for example, and that's going to change the units inside of the ruler. On the right side in the bottom portion of your document view, you have your scroll bar, so you can scroll left, right, up, or down on your image. And at the very top of your document view, you have the title of your document or your image, as well as whether or not it's modified and the zoom level. So we have 19.7% zoom right now. And finally, at the far right, you have this little X if you wanted to close this out. On the very right side of the document view is going to be your studio. So here you're going to see a variety of panels, and you can rearrange these. So if you wanted to dock these somewhere else, you can always click and drag the tabs for a specific panel. And you can also rearrange the order here. And of course, these panels will change depending on the persona you're in. But inside of the photo persona, we have various panels for editing a photo, as well as painting, selecting colors, etc. So we have a histogram here if we wanted to view the distribution of our color channels. And this is just going to basically show how well this photo was exposed and what the range of colors are in the photo. We also have the color panel for selecting a foreground or background color, which we can then paint with using either the paint tools or even something like a layer mask. Swatches if you wanted to organize your colors and select colors to save inside of a certain swatch. That way you can basically create color schemes as you're working in your projects. You've got your brushes panel here for selecting a brush that you want to use with the paint tool. So right now I have the view tool. If I change this to the paintbrush tool, I can go through the various brushes here and then also make adjustments using the context toolbar. So let me go back to the color tab here. You also have your layer adjustments, so you can make adjustments to your photos in the form of a layer adjustment. This is just a non-destructive way of editing your photo. I'm not going to get too much into that right now. But to the right of that, you have your layers panel. This is where all your layers are going to be. In Affinity, you have multiple layer types, including image layers, pixel layers, layer adjustments, vector layers, etc. Then you have effects you can add to your layers or to objects. You've also got styles here, which is just another way of adding effects. And my favorite tab probably is the stock tab. This just allows you to quickly find free stock images using free stock websites. So there's a little drop down here and you can choose from 3 different sites. So these are the 3 most popular sites: Unsplash, Pexels, and Pixabay. I've used all of these in the past, even when not working inside of Affinity. So when I'm working with GIMP or even Photoshop, I've used photos from here. But you can type in the search box whatever search term you want. Right now I have the search term model in here, and that's just going to give you various photos of models. So it's just a quick way of finding a free photo. And if I double click on here, that's going to open up this stock photo in a new browser window, and then I can download this from here and open it up into Affinity. So let's come back here to the Layers tab. Below that we have the Navigator. So this is for zooming in and out of your image. as well as navigating around your image. You've got the transform tab, and this is usually going to be whenever you are transforming an object or a layer. So let me hold the control key and zoom out a bit with my mouse wheel. Grab the move tool, and if I click on this, you'll see that's going to bring up some transform handles around our current layer. And you can see now the transform tab is going to be active here. So you can choose the origin from which you want to transform, and you can also make adjustments to the width, height, or position based on X or Y, and whether you want to rotate this or shear this. So shearing is just when you basically move the top portion of the layer to the right, for example, the bottom to the left. So creating that rhombus shape. You've got your history tab here if you want to view the history of changes you've made to your image inside of your current session. Your channels for viewing your color channels, as well as the alpha channel. So this is an RGB image, which means it has a red, green, and blue channel. And then the alpha channel just means there is transparency. So if you were to erase pixels on this main layer, it would display transparency below it. Finally, this last tab is for previewing your image as a 32-bit image, so a high bit depth image. I'm not going to get into that right now, so I'll come back to the Navigator tab. And below the studio, the final section here, the final portion of the layout is the status bar. This is going to display key modifiers and shortcut keys for a particular tool you have selected. So for example, right now we have the Move tool, and this is telling me things I can do with the Move tool. So I can drag this layer to move it, so click and drag. If I click on another object, which I don't have another object on here right now, it would select that object. Or I can click off on the empty area to deselect it. And you can see here, if I drag, it'll produce a marquee select. Let me just click and drag my mouse here. There's the marquee select. And I can also just drag this. So the little key modifiers and the instructions for how to use a tool are going to change as you hover your mouse over various parts of your image, for example, or as you click on or off a layer. So this is a pretty dynamic little status bar that's going to update depending on the tool you're using and what sort of things you're doing with that tool. So let's just get this layer back in place by using the alignment options here inside of the context toolbar for the Move tool. One last thing I'll mention before I close out this tutorial is that you can add additional panels. So you'll remember that the studio has tons of panels in it already, and those panels, of course, will change depending on the persona that we have clicked on, or the persona we have active. So let me come back to the photo persona. If I wanted to add new panels, I can go to View, Studio, and I can select from any of these panels. Depending on the panel I select, it may pop up over here in the Studio section, or it may pop up, for example, to the right of our Tools panel, or as a brand new floating panel. So for example, let me go to Batch, and that's going to open this up over here. And also if I go to View, Studio, and let's go with Paragraph, that will open this Paragraph panel up as its own little floating panel. So I can close this one out using the little X right there, and I can close the batch out by going to View, Studio, and click the Batch option, and you can see the Paragraph options unchecked because I closed it out manually. But here we have the Batch option, and clicking on it is going to uncheck that. Alright, so that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more tutorials featuring premium software. You can also check out my website at prophotovector.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.